Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for The Bard's Truth with yours truly, the Green Bard. This is episode 6.1 of our Direwolves of Winterfell series, covering Ghost and Jon's Warg bond in A Game of Thrones. If you haven't listened to the prior parts of this series, you may want to check them out now. As a primer, consider this SSM. Question: are all the Stark children wargs / skin changers with their wolves? George: to a greater or lesser degree, yes, but the amount of control varies widely. Question: yes, I know that Lady is dead, but assuming that they were all alive and all the children as well, would all the wolves have bonded to the kids as Bran and Summer did? George: Bran and Summer are somewhat of a special case. Here, we'll investigate Ghost and Jon's bond in the light of those thoughts from our author. I also theorized that the direwolves, as creatures of magic, possess telepathic power of their own. The red-eyed and green-eyed children of the forest are much more powerful than their yellow-eyed brethren. Does the same hold true for direwolves? In Part 5, we investigated this hypothesis that the color of the direwolves' eyes might correspond to them having stronger telepathic genes, with Shaggydog and his green eyes. While we did not have a lot of material to investigate this hypothesis with Shaggydog, that is not an issue with Ghost. Under my hypothesis, Ghost would have the strongest magic of his packmates, so Ghost and Jon's bond might end up being the strongest of the set, even though Jon's magical gifts are less developed than Bran's. Ghost has also been described as an albino, and it may be that this is the genetic trait that makes him special telepathically, aside from or in conjunction with my hypothesis. Albinos in this story, and in George R.R. Martin's past work as well, are all special telepathically, including Bloodraven, the Ghost of Highheart, and maybe Melisandre. Not sure if she's technically an albino or not. Ghost is thematically tied to Bloodraven, in fact, but I think he might also be a special telepath like him. In the end, if in our study of Ghost, we find that he is special telepathically, we won't know whether it is because of his eye color, his albinism, or both. Indeed, his eye color may be because of his albinism. It may even be that the red-eyed children of the forest are all albinos too. There are none in our story, so we have no evidence of their pigments. A Game of Thrones, a silent pup, and a boy without a home. Several themes from our prior volumes continue here with Ghost and his bond to Jon, including personality and mood mirroring, obedience versus independence, shadowing / protecting / fear of the wolves, the related wolves' innate ability to sense threats, belonging to the pack, the instinct to hunt, being affectionate when they're together, and bad things happening when they're separated. We'll watch for these as we follow Ghost's story and analyze his bond to Jon. To this list, we add specifically for Ghost the theme of his silence. Ghost is completely silent. He never barks, howls, whines, growls, or uses his physical voice in any other way. One must wonder why this is. Consider what speech is in the first place: communication. So, doesn't Ghost need to communicate? Wouldn't that hamper him, not being able to use his voice? Clearly the answer should be yes. Theon Greyjoy even suggests Ghost would be weak and die quickly. Yet it turned out that Ghost was the biggest of the litter, so the lack of speech doesn't seem to hurt his development. Albinos typically have other health issues as well, which is one reason I question whether he's a true albino or just a direwolf with red eyes and white fur. Certainly it could be that Jon is just a good master, but it may be more than that. My theory is that Ghost has a much stronger ability, mayhaps unique among his packmates, to communicate telepathically. I think the evidence shows that he can reach out telepathically to humans in the same way that human skin changers reach out telepathically to beasts. We see an example of this in our first chapter, and it continues throughout the story. One must note that Preston Jacobs studied Ghost to some degree in his recent Night's Watch video series. While I do not attribute my theory to his ideas, I will credit him with finding several instances of this theme in Jon and Ghost's story. Lastly, there are a few themes of Jon's personality that drive our analysis: his selflessness, his seriousness, and his sporadic and sudden spats of anger and extremely aggressive behavior over things that he feels are not fair in life. These can be alternately reflections of and reflected in Ghost. Preston's ideas go further. He thinks that someone is warging Ghost, someone other than Jon, such as Bloodraven, and using Ghost to plant ideas in Jon's mind. I find this tinfoil idea fascinating, and will consider it against other more mundane explanations for Ghost's and Jon's behaviors. A Game of Thrones, Bran 1, Pups in the Snow. We revisit the first direwolf scene again and focused on Jon and Ghost's part. We'll start before Ghost is found because Jon's participation in finding the first 5 pups partially establishes his character. Jon is the hero of the scene. His intelligence and selflessness are on display. There's even a bit of humor. He smartly recognizes them as direwolves, and that the wolves were meant for the children. Then he sacrifices his own opportunity to have a wolf in favor of his half-siblings. This is a huge indicator of his selfless character and the bond of love shared by him and his brothers and sisters. The idea that the children were meant to have these pups has a potential double meaning. The mainstream connotation is that fate meant them for the children. The more supernatural one is that a powerful entity connected to the old gods, like Bloodraven, literally selected the pregnant mother with her in utero pups and sent her there for each child to have a wolf. I find this idea highly compelling. The fact that no direwolf has been seen south of the wall for 200 years is the most compelling evidence of it, although I think I've found some other corroborating information. Either way, under this assumption, it is left up to chance as to which pup got matched to which child. The exception is Ghost, and possibly Summer, who we see Jon hand to Bran. "It's no freak," Jon said calmly. "That's a direwolf. They grow larger than the other kind." Theon Greyjoy said, "There's not been a direwolf sighted south of the wall in 200 years. "I see one now," Jon replied. Later, Bran gave the pup a nervous stroke, then turned as Jon said, "Here you go." His half-brother put a second pup into his arms. "There are 5 of them." Bran sat down in the snow and hugged the wolf pup to his face. Its fur was soft and warm against his cheek. Later, "Lord Stark," Jon said. It was strange to hear him call father that, so formal. Bran looked at him with desperate hope. "There are 5 pups," he told father. 3 male, 2 female. "What of it, Jon?" "You have 5 true-born children," Jon said. 3 sons, 2 daughters. The direwolf is the sigil of your house. Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord." Bran saw his father's face change, saw the other men exchange glances. He loved Jon with all his heart at that moment. Even at 7, Bran understood what his brother had done. The count had come right only because Jon had admitted it himself. He had included the girls, even included Rickon, the baby, but not the bastard who wore the surname Snow, the name that custom decreed be given to all those in the north unlucky enough to be born with no name of their own. Their father understood as well. "You want no pup for yourself, Jon?" he asked softly. "The direwolf graces the banners of House Stark," Jon pointed out. "I am no Stark, father." Their lord father regarded Jon thoughtfully. After this selfless act, Jon is rewarded with the finding of Ghost. The scene is at first confusing because Ghost never makes a sound, yet Jon swears he heard something, which led to the discovery of our 6th pup. Remember, Ghost never speaks with his voice, so Jon did not hear him whine or bark, unless he heard it in his mind. This is probably the case, yet let's be clear that it had to be Ghost who reached out for Jon, not the other way around. It could be that Bloodraven had some hand in this too, but the only evidence I can provide for this is that Bran hears the wind in the trees, which is similar language to what is heard when people visit the Godswood to pray in front of the Heart Tree, such as Theon in A Dance with Dragons at Ramsay's wedding. The wind may be an indication of the trees talking. Either way, I conclude that for Jon to hear Ghost in this way, Ghost must have reached out to Jon telepathically. The formation of their bond is instantaneous, and Jon knows it. Bran also thinks it curious that Ghost's eyes alone are open. This may be Bloodraven's doing as well, but I don't have any definitive evidence for this. To me, this is our first in a long line of evidence that Ghost can reach out telepathically, almost as well as the telepathically gifted humans around him. He is the only one in the litter with red eyes. Shaggydog has green eyes, and the rest have golden eyes. Ghost is also unique in that his fur is pure white, fitting for a wolf bonded to a young boy named Snow. His look is reminiscent of Weirwoods and Bloodraven. I further asked the question, why was Ghost separate from his packmates? It's presented as if he was driven off by his brothers and sisters, as if he were a runt, but this explanation rings hollow to me, given that Ghost later grows to be the largest of the litter. I think it could be that Bloodraven compelled the pup to crawl away so that he could ensure the others didn't find him, to ensure that it was Jon who found him. His eyes would have to have been open to allow the Weirwood net user to see and ensure the pup was well hidden. Halfway across the bridge, Jon pulled up suddenly. "What is it, Jon?" their Lord Father asked. "Can't you hear it?" Bran could hear the wind in the trees, the clatter of their hooves on the ironwood planks, the whimpering of his hungry pup. But Jon was listening to something else. "There," Jon said. He swung his horse around and galloped back across the bridge. They watched him dismount where the direwolf lay dead in the snow, watched him kneel. A moment later he was riding back to them, smiling. "He must have crawled away from the others," Jon said. "Or been driven away," their father said, looking at the sixth pup. His fur was white, where the rest of the litter was gray. His eyes were as red as the blood of the ragged man who had died that morning. Bran thought it curious that this pup alone would have opened his eyes while the others were still blind. "An albino," the young Greyjoy said with wry amusement. "This one'll die even faster than the others." Jon Snow gave his father's ward a long, chilling look. "I think not, Greyjoy," he said. "This one belongs to me." In the final exchange with Theon, we saw another piece of Jon's personality, his seriousness. He appreciates humor, but he is much more serious than Theon, which explains why they don't get along very well. Speaking of, this could be one reason Ghost is always silent, to mirror Jon's businesslike manner. As I've already said, I believe that he does not need to speak because he has the power to reach out to Jon telepathically, a power which his golden-eyed littermates may not possess. With that in mind, I wonder if Ghost and Jon's bond developed slightly sooner than at the moment of the scene you just heard. Jon hands Summer to Bran, and then Bran's bond to Summer seems to form almost instantaneously. With Jon making the first contact with Summer, oughtn't Jon have established a bond with Summer instead? That is, of course, unless Ghost had already called out to Jon telepathically before Bran arrived on the scene, establishing the psychic connection then. Of course, that's all speculation. And that's a good spot to stop for this time. As you may be aware, Ghost appears on page in this series much more than any of the other direwolves, so this looks like it will be the longest of our 6 parts, about 50% longer than Bran and Summer's story.
So high the wall above my eyes, but once I watched the sword of the morning rise.
Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video.
Her bell I'd ring in the window, but lies should sing. It's so lonely neath the shade of the wall.
Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far.
It's so lonely neath the shade of the wall so high.
If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.